was pretty impressive. I was going to congratulate you all for showing up this morning. I was going to give you all a gold star if I could. I know it's early, it's day 3. For some of you, even day 4, your feet are hurting. It is a long walk. Okay, I've only done that a couple times. All right, thankfully I don't have to do it too many more times today. But it's so wonderful to see so many faces this morning. My name's Kim Messer, I'm with IBM, and I have the privilege of being here today to talk to you about a very important subject, diversity and inclusion. I know we're all here to attend a technology conference, but today a conversation about technology cannot happen in isolation. A conversation about diversity and inclusion needs to be had alongside of any conversation that's involving technology. And so we hope over the next 45 minutes or so to give you a glimpse into IBM and our approach to diversity and inclusion, how it impacts not only our employees in the workplace, but also how we impact the marketplace. So how it's impacting our employees, our clients, and how we're ensuring responsible stewardship of our technology. So it was mentioned in the video a few minutes ago, but I want to just spend a couple of minutes setting the stage for you and telling you a little bit about IBM's history for those of you that are not aware, because it sets a very important foundation to the rest of the discussion that we're going to have this morning. So some of you may not be aware that IBM is 107 years old. And when we became IBM in 1911, even from those early days, we've always been advocates for underrepresented and marginalized communities. We hired our first person with disability in 1914. We introduced equal pay for equal work in the 1930s. And we hired our first female vice president in 1943. But it's something very, very important happened in 1953 that I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about. And that's policy letter number 4. So policy letter number 4 is a few things I want to say about it. One, it's the first sort of non-discrimination policy of its kind ever. And essentially it says that IBM will hire people regardless of race, color, or creed. So what was happening in 1953? So for any history buffs out there, 1953, IBM was experiencing a boom in computers. And I will let any of you computer history buffs go Google what particular IBM computer was being produced in 1953. But we were experiencing a boom, and we were looking to expand to the US South, build new manufacturing facilities. And at that time, segregation was still in full force. So the president at the time, Thomas Watson Jr., wrote to the governors of those states and said, if you want IBM to bring economic prosperity and jobs to your states, black and white workers need to work side by side. Luckily, IBM was successful. This is 10 years before the US Civil Rights Act, 2 years before Brown versus Board of Education, which essentially eliminated segregation in public schools. So it was a very pivotal moment in IBM's history and really formed the foundation or the cornerstone of everything that came after it in terms of our commitment to diversity and inclusion. Policy letter number 4 became our global non-discrimination policy, and over the past 60 years, that policy has been updated to include things like age, gender, ability, sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. I also just want to spend only a couple of minutes tooting IBM's horn, for a couple of minutes, so bear with me. I just want to highlight a few recent awards. So just over the last sort of 6 months, call your attention to a couple of things. The first being the Catalyst Award. So earlier this year, IBM received the Catalyst Award for the 4th time. We're the only technology company to receive the award 4 times in recognition of our support for advancing women in technical careers. Just today, actually, at the Grace Hopper Conference, we are being awarded a recognition for our representation of women technical talent at IBM from the Anita Borg Institute. So that's happening in Houston, Texas. We also recently received an award from the US Business Leaders Network for work that we do to help create opportunities for differently abled people around the world. And the last one I want to highlight, you'll notice right in the middle of your screen it says BEST, is an organization that we work with called the Human Rights Campaign. Now, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the Human Rights Campaign. A very important organization, the largest US civil rights organization in the US. And IBM has been working with the Human Rights Campaign for almost 20 years. And we've been part of something called the Corporate Equality Index. Very likely, many of you in the audience work for companies that also participate in the Corporate Equality Index. We've achieved a 100% score for the 17th consecutive year this year, so we're very proud of that accomplishment. And this index measures an employer's programs, policies, and support for the LGBT community. So it's a very important index. It's actually the LGBT community that we want to spend the rest of our discussion today focused on. Oop, went too quick. So just to, again, set some context here. So I mentioned a lot of awards, for people with disabilities, for women, for the LGBT community. We support many diverse constituency groups at IBM, but we know that we are globally recognized and acknowledged as a leader in the work that we do to support the LGBT community. So the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community around the world. And that's why we wanted to spend time today focused on this community and sharing some of the work that we do. So I am part of a very unique team, a team that does not exist in any other company that I'm aware of. I'm part of a global diversity business development team focused on LGBT markets. Now this team, what's even more interesting about this team is that it was created over 17 years ago by a very forward-thinking sales executive at IBM who was looking for a really cool idea, for somebody to come to him with a really great idea, and this was the idea. So 17 years later, we're still here. So what do? So we help client teams differentiate IBM in competitive situations through our values. So I have the opportunity to go out and talk to clients, share our best practices, talk to companies about the work that we're doing to support diversity and inclusion, and I am a free resource for client teams to leverage. And so we work in 42 markets around the world. We help create access to new decision makers. We help enhance client relationships. And we also feed pipeline. And I just gave you an example here. In 2017, our team contributed to, it was $227 million in pipeline and $70 million in signings. And we're a team of 3 people. All right. So this is a really unique approach, something that not many companies or any company that I'm aware of have adopted, and we're very proud because we recognize that the leadership that we show within inside the walls of our company is something that our clients could really learn from and benefit from, and we're really happy to share that thought leadership. All right, the other way, so I should have prefaced sort of that slide by saying that a lot of times when we think about diversity and inclusion, it's always a conversation about workplace, about what's happening inside the walls of your company. And so what makes us unique is the fact that we've taken this message into the marketplace. And so the sales side is one piece of that. The other very important side of diversity and inclusion today for companies has to do with advocacy. So the model that you see up on your screen was part of a study, paper actually, that came out in 2016 from the Center for Talent and Innovation. Some of you may be familiar with it. And it talks about a model that companies use to engage with LGBT communities in the countries in which they operate. So it applies to any company, but specifically, I would say this has a good application to multinational companies who operate in countries all over the world. So it's very, you're a very smart group of people. You're at a technology conference. It's a very, very straightforward model. So the when in Rome model, so a company adheres to the local norms and customs of the country in which they're operating. We have the embassy model where a company has a certain set of values inside the walls of their organization, but they don't do much outside the walls of their company to advance the rights of those employees, and in this case, the LGBT community. I would say, 10 years ago, most companies kind of operated in this, what we would call safe space. So you would espouse a certain set of values, but you didn't necessarily take too many risks outside of your workplace. So that could probably apply even in the US today to some degree, but certainly when we're talking about regions outside of North America. Now, it's the advocate model that IBM supports and believes in, and I'm very pleased to say that many companies have moved from an embassy model to an advocacy model. So this is where your activism goes beyond the walls of your company to very actively take a position in the community to help advance the rights of this particular constituency group. I'm having a delay there, just give me a second. Oh, there we are. And it might actually go forward one more by mistake because I pressed it twice. There you go. All right, I think we're good. So when I talk about advocacy, there's a lot of stuff going on in this slide, so I'll explain in a second. A significant shift that has happened, certainly for IBM, and one that I'm very, very proud of, is that we're no longer quiet about our values. We, as a matter of fact, are very vocal about our values, and partly because we've been forced to, unfortunately. If you just look at the United States, the number of discriminatory bills and discriminatory legislation that were proposed in 2016 and 2017 was more than ever had been proposed in any previous in decades, right? So we were faced with a very sort of critical point where we claim to have this set of values. Well, what are we going to do about it? So the example that you see on the screen here, no one should face discrimination for being who they are. IBM took out full-page ads in 3 Texas newspapers in 2016 to combat what were known as the bathroom bills, which we viewed as very discriminatory legislation. We have a significant population in Texas, over 10,000 employees, and we knew that it would directly impact the employees that we had working in that state. So we were very, very forward-leaning in our messaging and very direct in our approach in terms of voicing our opposition. And so this is just one example, but this happens every day all over the world where we are standing up for the rights of the LGBT community. All of these logos that you see here, I just want to take a couple of seconds and then I'm going to pass things over to my colleague Joy. My team is also responsible for all of our LGBT sponsorships around the globe. So we work with over 40 for-profit and non-profit organizations around the world. So what do we do with these organizations? We do lots of things. We hold business forums, we host clients at events, we sponsor events, we speak at panels. But the important thing about advocacy, and you'll notice a lot of these logos are organizations that are outside North America. What's most important is understanding that as a multinational company, it's not about us going in and espousing our values as the right values. It's about helping those local organizations and local community groups on the ground who are doing the very important work and who understand the cultural context. Those are the organizations that we partner with, and we help empower them to do the work that they need to do to support this community. All right. I'm just going to close by saying, I hope I've given you a bit of a view of kind of the work that my team does in the community, but of course none of this would be possible without people like Joy, who I'm going to introduce you to in a second. Joy is part of our global diversity team on the HR side of IBM, and if it wasn't for people like her and her team who are doing just incredible things to support our community internally at IBM, I wouldn't be able to get up here and talk about all the great things we can do in the marketplace. So thank you very much. Joy.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. So this is the interactive part of today's discussion. So I really wanted Kim to set the stage. We have a really proud, strong legacy, heritage, and tradition at IBM about diversity and inclusion. But I had a couple of questions I wanted to ask the audience. So here they are. This is the interactive part. Show of hands, because I really want to know who's actually in the audience, and this is probably going to frame and customize my discussion for today. Here's the first question. Is diversity and inclusion a part of your job, an integral part of your job? And then there are 3 options for this, and I'm going to have you raise your hand. Again, is diversity and inclusion a part of your job? Raise your hand if yes, it is an integral part of your day job. Second option, yes, but as a volunteer. So maybe you volunteer at your employee resource group, or you volunteer locally in your communities or schools. Okay. Third option, no, I'm actually in this presentation just because I have a personal interest in diversity and inclusion. Wow, okay, excellent. Here's my next question. How would you describe the stage of LGBT plus inclusion in your company? There's 3 options here. Option number 1, we're at the initial stages of talking about LGBT inclusion, meaning, about less than 1 year. Okay. This is a safe place, by the way. It's okay, raise your hand. Maybe your company is at the intermediate stage, maybe between 1 and 3 years, having a discussion about the LGBT community. Last, we would say that our company is in the advanced stage. We've been talking about LGBT inclusion for over 3 years. Okay, excellent. Okay, here's my last question. Does your company have a program or policy that covers the needs of the transgender community? If your company talks about transgender inclusion and the answer is yes, raise your hand. Okay. How about companies where, no, we're not that advanced and we aren't really talking about transgender inclusion. We don't know how to have a sophisticated, modern, up-to-date conversation because we really don't have the nomenclature. How many of your companies are there? Okay. And how many of your companies, well, I'm just not sure if we have a discussion or a conversation around the transgender community. I just don't know. It's not familiar to me. Okay. All right, we're going to keep the interaction going. How many of you in this room believe that this Post-it note says the same thing? Right? I love your reaction because that's exactly what I was hoping for. How many of you would say that this Post-it note says exactly the same thing? Interestingly, not one hand went up. How many of you have been talked to according to the Post-it note on your right-hand side? The one that says, I will always follow you, right? And look at my reaction even when I said it. Light, fluffy, airy, comfortable, safe, productive. How many of you raise your hand? I am spoken to in my workplace like that. Okay. Okay. How many of you are sometimes spoken to with, I will always find you? Right? Right. It's scary. When I actually showed this slide yesterday, people had this real visceral reaction. And what's funny is you all did too. Every one of you in this room realized I have a different perception of how that feels because it feels differently. When Kim introduced me, the first thing that she said was, there are people like Joy in the human resources profession. And even though I sit in global diversity and inclusion today, at my very heart, I'm a human resources professional. I hold 2 certifications in HR. If I ever for 1 second forget that the H in my title stands for human, I'm in the wrong profession. It's time for me to look for another job. And if you didn't think that those 2 Post-it notes said 2 very different things, if you're a leader, if you're a coach, if you're a mentor, if you're a formal manager, if you're an executive that's in this room, I want you to realize the influence and the power that you have by the words that you communicate to others. Because did I just make a point that words matter? You bet they do. And not only do they matter how they're said, they're actually integrated into the culture of our company. When we think about culture, remember IBM has about 370,000 employees around the world. We do business in 179 countries. We have employees in 98 of those countries. I love that. Wow, right? The thing that's really important for us to remember is somebody actually approached me one time and they said, Joy, how do you change culture at IBM? And I can only speak from my point of view, and my reaction was, you got to lower the center of gravity. Why do you do that? That was a common follow-up question. This is how you lower the center of gravity in your organization. One person, one conversation, one interaction at a time. Because in my job, even though I sit in the global diversity and inclusion space, I can't possibly, as one person, influence 370,000 employees. But what I could try to do is influence and enable managers, leaders, coaches, advocates, informal people in conversations making a difference. And I'll tell you how this culture lowering the center of gravity happens for me personally. Our CEO always says, start a meeting, share a story. Here's my story. I lost my mom a couple of years ago, and I lost her through hospice. I was on a business trip in North Carolina when I got that devastating phone call. And I'll tell you, if you've never had the conversation that you're told somebody that you love is actively dying, I promise you it will slap you in the face, it will punch you in the stomach, and you're going to get a knot in your throat where you can't talk. Well, that happened to me on a business trip. I was paralyzed. I didn't know what to do. And I happened to be staying with a colleague who was also an HR professional, and I called my manager and I said, I'm on a business trip in North Carolina. I just got this devastating phone call. I've got a week-long set of meetings planned. I'm going to head to my hometown in Ohio as soon as the week is over. What did my manager realize? I'm not thinking. I'm paralyzed. I'm stunned. I am not in a position where I am functioning in a way that I should be as a human being. So she did the right thing. She picked up the phone. She called my friend who I was staying with, and she said, Heather, you have one job, and that is to get Joy safely home today. I don't care about her business meetings. That one friend in HR got my calendar, canceled every meeting, and sent me home. I was out of work for several weeks. I had 3 people covering my position while I was gone. And when I came back, I said to my executive, who, oh, by the way, talk about loyalty, lowering the center of gravity. When I was an HR generalist, I worked for her for 7 years. I moved into a new role. I had 2 jobs after that. She was my sponsor. She was my coach. She's helped me advance into other careers. And who am I working for again? That exact same executive. 6 years for me wasn't enough, because I don't care if she wants me to pick up toothpicks. I'm going to be the best toothpick picker I can actually be. Why? Because I'm loyal to her, right? And this is what she did when I came back from work. We're a 2-family IBM household. We both were able to go ahead and relocate to Ohio, where my family was, because I don't know how many of you where your mothers were the matriarch of your family, because mine was. We knew that we needed to heal as a family, and so we worked remotely for over 3 months. And I said to my executive when I came back, I don't know what to do with all of these emails. And she said, Joy, are you sitting in front of your computer? I said, yes, I am. She said, what day did you go out? I said, October 5th. She said, I want you to go to October 5th. I want you to hit the first email that came up on October 5th. I said, okay. She said, no, now what I want you to do is I want you to scroll all the way down to today's date. I want you to click on it and hit the shift key. And she said, are all of those emails selected? And I said, they are. She said, now hit to the delete key. She was serious, right? I'm like, I can't do that. She said, yes, you can. I did it, and suddenly the weight was lifted. That is exactly how leaders, advocates, coaches, sponsors lower the center of gravity, because I'm still talking about that experience. So again, do words matter? You bet they do. Does your tenor, does your tone, does the way you articulate messages matter? They do. How many times have you been in a situation like this and people go, diversity and inclusion, it's really good for business? It is. There's no question in my mind that there are not only subjective opinion, but material facts and statistics that say that's a really good idea. But remember, I'm a human resources professional. What do I think about? The human side of our business. So there's no doubt in my mind that diversity and inclusion is good for business. But how many of you have also heard that same phrase that says, diversity and inclusion is good for business, not only because it's the ethical thing to do, it's the morally right thing to do. And then they say, but it's a business decision. It's not personal. Did I just show a slide that showed that depending upon how we react, how we talk, how we correspond, and how we discuss things as a team is personal? You bet it is. We're not a bunch of machines going into corporations, not yet, doing the jobs that we actually do. We're human beings. So whenever you hear somebody say, it's not personal, it's just business, that's not true. It's always personal. Because everything that we do impacts the individuals on our teams and in our organizations around the world. Kim already mentioned this, and I wanted to go ahead and pivot the conversation because there are 3 really important legacy and tradition and heritage dates that are on this slide. First of all, we talked about in 1997, make sure I can see that. Oh, sorry, 1984 is where I wanted to go. In 1984, sexual orientation was added to our global non-discrimination policy. And Kim alluded to that back in 1984. If you look up at the top of this chart, back in 1997, we started offering LGBT plus inclusive benefits in the United States. Right now in 2018, IBM offers LGBT plus inclusive benefits in 52 countries around the world, including in countries where being LGBT plus is still criminalized. Thank you. In addition to that, there's a date on the slide that says 2002. In 2002, we added gender identity and gender expression to IBM's global non-discrimination policy. And when you think about any corporation's global non-discrimination policy, including IBM, if I went up to a manager or executive and I said, hey, do you know that IBM doesn't discriminate based on sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression? They probably memorized our global non-discrimination policy. But if I challenged them one step further and I said, but what does it mean? If I ask somebody, what is the definition of sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression, they might fumble through a definition. So it's incredibly important as we're having conversations in our organizations that not only that we have this in a global non-discrimination policy, but that the leaders at the top of our business understand the importance of sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression, because we're invisible in the organization. So as you're thinking through where your organizations are in the maturity level of this conversation, leaders, advocates, coaches, mentors, executives, you have the opportunity to influence where our organizations go. Okay. The other thing that we wanted to share very briefly, and this is that interactive part as well, don't worry, we have socks that we can give away, especially when people ask questions. How many of your organizations, and okay if you don't know, but I'm just curious, how many of your organizations have a voluntary process through HR called voluntary self-identification? Voluntary self-identification is a process where individuals in your organization go into their HR system, they confidentially identify something about themselves, a characteristic about themselves. In this case, voluntary self-identification is for the LGBT community. Are there any other organizations here, and it's okay if you don't know, where voluntary self-identification is something that you actually offer to your employees? Excellent. What's really great about voluntary self-identification is because, well, number one, it's voluntary. Okay, somebody actually goes into the HR system, they make this conscious decision, and they identify as a member of the LGBT+ community. What's also really important about self-identification is that it's private, it's confidential. Other people don't have access to this information, including your own manager, unless you choose to have that conversation with them. The other thing that's really important about voluntary self-identification is that you can choose to change that status at any time. If there's anything that I've learned as an HR professional, and most particularly in diversity and inclusion over the past couple of years, I've understood that there is a tremendous amount of fluidity with somebody's LGBT status. That person is constantly coming out. Every time I meet somebody new, I've got to make the determination, am I going to come out? Am I going to be brave? Am I going to be courageous? Am I going to tell them authentically who I am? The other thing that I've learned about this fluidity of that decision is, what if I move to a new job, a new team, a new organization, a new manager? Or what happens if I take an international assignment and I'm now living in a country where it's criminalized to be a member of the LGBT+ community? Now I have to courageously make that decision as well. So what's really good about voluntary self-identification is that the individual can opt in or opt out at any time. Here's the value to your organizations. If you've not thought through a voluntary self-identification process, think about integrating that into your organizations, because there are a couple of ways we use these indicators. Number one, every year, our CEO, Ginny Rometty, holds what's called a talent review. How many of you in your organizations have something called succession planning? Okay, succession planning is where we identify those future leaders in our organizations, make sure they have mentors, make sure they have coaches, make sure they have sponsors. Let's make sure that we put them in the right career opportunities so that they can be our future leaders. So that's what succession planning does. Because of this self-identification at IBM, we do have meetings. As a matter of fact, I'm going to have a conversation in 3 weeks with the Senior Vice President, who reports directly to our CEO, Bridget von Kralogen, and I are going to have a conversation about the LGBT community and the individuals who have self-identified and whose managers have said, these are people who are future leaders. So we narrow the center of the conversation. We lower the center of gravity, and we make sure that there's visibility, because the way that we can see them is they consciously chose to go into the HR system and say, I'm here. I want to be recognized. I want this opportunity. And so succession planning at IBM, because of self-identification, allows us to lower the center of gravity, narrow the conversation, isolate this population, and make sure they're not invisible. if they choose not to be. The other thing that's really important about voluntary self-identification, I mentioned this earlier, is that IBM does business in 179 countries. I mentioned we have employees in 98 of those countries. We don't have voluntary self-identification in every country where we do business. Why? Because it's against the law in some countries. We are a US-based company. Our corporate headquarters is in Armonk, New York. So in all of those other 178 countries where we do business, we're a guest. And we need to make sure that we follow local laws and policies and practices and the culture that's actually there, because we don't want to put any of our employees in harm's way. In addition to that, I mentioned that we have benefits, LGBT inclusive benefits in 52 countries. And the other thing that's really important is we have gender affirmation treatment benefits. We started offering gender affirmation treatment benefits in the United States in the 1990s. For those of you that don't know what gender affirmation treatment benefits are, if somebody identifies as transgender, there might be a number of medical procedures that they might consider throughout their entire transitional journey. So we want to make sure that we have the opportunity to support them. So although we've been offering gender affirmation treatment benefits in the United States for years, we're now offering gender affirmation treatment benefits in 5 other countries, one of those being India. And I'll tell you the other countries that are on our list: Thailand, and we're not hiding away from Central and Eastern Europe. On my radar screen is Russia, Hungary, Romania, and I'm coming to Latin America. We're looking at Chile, Colombia, Uruguay, and Peru. And we know in all of those countries, it's not always comfortable to have this conversation. But if we don't go out there and be bold and courageous and make an important stand and tell our employees, this is important, we want you to feel included, we want your voice to be heard and be powerful, then we have to make people a little wiggle in their seat uncomfortable, and I'm okay with that. Thank you. Wow, I really love this group right here. I think I'm just going to talk to you guys the rest of the time. I'm actually not surprised that it's Heather and Michelle, because I've been talking to Heather and Michelle every day that I've been here, giving them a hug, and they told me that they were coming, so it's always nice to see a smiley face, so thank you. The other thing that I wanted to close with today, at least my part, and I'm going to turn it over to Kim, and we want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to ask questions. There are a couple of things that we've done that we're incredibly proud of. I mentioned previously about gender affirmation treatment benefits and making sure that we have trans-inclusive policies around the globe. Just this past year, we released a white paper on March 31st that was intentionally and deliberately released on that date, because does anybody know what March 31st actually was? It was International Transgender Day of Visibility. So on March 31st, on Saturday, IBM released this white paper called Gender Transition in the Global Workplace. The reason we released this white paper, and I loved Kim's introduction, we are a company built on values. We're a company built on practices. There's a heart right in the center of our organization. When you join our company, you're part of the IBM family. Well, the thing about IBM is, well, we want to change the world. What I loved about hearing the Microsoft CEO earlier this week was, guess what? Microsoft is too. And there's nothing more powerful than walking into those double doors a couple of days ago and seeing that sign on all of these tables and seeing Microsoft Ignite, Diversity in Tech, sponsored by IBM. Because I'm absolutely convinced the collaboration between Microsoft and IBM, I truly believe we can change the world. And we're going to do that one employee at a time, lowering the center of gravity and not being afraid to have intimate conversations about tough topics. So thank you, Microsoft, for having us here. Thank you for hosting Shauna, a Diversity in Tech, having the thought process that it's really important that we include this conversation in something so important to what we're doing. We have a social responsibility and a moral imperative to change the world. And so when you think about this white paper, it is publicly available. It's been translated in 5 languages. It was originally available in English, and then we translated it in French, Spanish, Portuguese, and wait for it, Japanese. Okay? The reason we translated it in Japanese is because we're starting to have those conversations and those dialogues in other languages in countries where it's not always really popular. So for people that are interested in learning more about this white paper that we co-authored with the Human Rights Campaign, it is publicly available on the IBM website in those 5 languages. And you just have to go to the ibm.com/inclusion website. Anybody who wants a color slick sheet of our white paper, we have them up here as well. So we'll make sure people get those in the hands of your companies. So for those of you, when I asked about what was the business maturity around LGBT inclusion in your organizations, and then more particularly, what are you doing around having the trans conversation? If you don't know what to do, if you don't know where to go, if you don't know how to initiate the conversation, talk to us. Call us. We're going to get this white paper in your hand. Literally, step by step, it's a first of its kind framework that says, how can we holistically not only take the manager and the colleagues, but the employee in the center of the conversation, because they're not going to transition at IBM all by themselves. I'm included in every conversation that we have with an employee who's transitioning at IBM around the world. And I assemble an entire team to wrap their arms around that employee, because we are there for one reason, and that is to love them through it. That's my job. And so what I do is I assemble a team of HR professionals, so whether that's IBM Medical, IBM Legal, the HR generalists in the organization, the manager, and absolutely the employee. It's a step-by-step process. It's flexible, it's holistic, and we want to make sure other companies who don't know how to have this conversation, that we put the information in your hands. In addition to that, you see a little bit of the framework down here. It's an online module. It's interactive. It's flexible. It's not rigid. And it's really customizable to whatever the employee's individual's needs are, wherever they are on their transition journey. We want to make sure that we're having the conversation and they're dictating what it means to help them on their journey. And then lastly, and I'm going to turn it over to Kim, we also released in 2017 3 LGBT inclusion modules. One we actually updated, it's called Becoming an LGBT+ Ally. And the other 2 we just created. They're available on IBM's online learning forum. They sit in an area called Leadership Academy. One of them is called LGBT+ Leading Inclusively. The other one is called Transgender Leading Inclusively. The target audience for all of these modules, 370 IBM employees worldwide. We want to make sure everybody in IBM knows how to have this conversation. And then we also released in June an Ally Knowledge Badge. It's a LGBT+ Ally Championship Badge. There's a series of activities and learning modules, interactive exercises, of course an exam as well. We want to test your knowledge. How much can we apply what we've learned? And then there's a component of engagement. So we want to make sure that we're impacting local communities. So with that, Kim, I'm going to turn it back over to you so you can conclude today's conversation, and then we'll turn it over for questions.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much, Joy. Thank you. This wasn't part of what I was going to say, but I've been at IBM for 18 years, and I am a member of the LGBT community, and I can tell you I came out during my time at IBM, and it was not an easy process. And even sitting here, knowing what I know about our company and hearing you talk about it, like it brings tears to my eyes, because I know that my experience, many of you at Microsoft and other tech companies, this is not the experience that many in our community have. And so I know how lucky I am and privileged I am to work for a company like IBM. So thank you for everything you do. I just want to wrap up a couple of things. Joy mentioned the white paper and also the Ally Badge. I think we have some brochures, right? Okay, we have some brochures available at the front, a few copies of the white paper if you're interested. I don't have many, but it is available online to download. And we also have some brochures on our Ally certification training, if that's something that your organization might like to learn more about. And I just wanted to wrap up by kind of bringing this sort of full circle from where we started, which is, why do we concern ourselves with diverse talent and diverse hiring? And I think, most of us here working for technology companies, we're at a very critical moment in time. Emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, are impacting the society, the world in which we live. And if we don't have diverse voices represented diverse perspectives represented in the creation of that technology, then it's not going to serve us in the best possible way. So it's very important. I guess what I should say is who is creating, the people who are creating the technology is critically important. Okay, so, and I know that, again, working for companies that many of us do, we're very fortunate where thought leadership around diversity and inclusion is always at the forefront, but it's something that we always just need to have at the back of our minds. This is critically important to ensuring that we're creating innovative technologies, that we're creating the best products and services for our clients, and creating the best world possible for ourselves and future generations. So thank you very much. We'd love to have some questions. There's nothing that's off limits, so feel free to ask us whatever might be top of mind. And if you decide to leave us this morning, I just want to thank you again for listening and participating. And hopefully we've changed a few hearts and minds in the audience. So thank you.
I was like, those socks are rad, first of all.
I would have given you a pair of socks, Heather.
No,
if you
I
would
know,
have asked.
totally. It's not about that. Anyway, my question for you is, as someone who is working in diversity and tech and building programs inside of Microsoft and with third-party events like SharePoint and all of that, so I did a SharePoint conference last year. We did our first track where we dedicated a track to diversity and inclusion. And I worked really hard to get, and to be diverse, to be inclusive, to look at intersectionality and all of that.
So important.
And so as far as the LGBTQ community,
Yes.
it's not something you necessarily wear on your sleeve, you know? And so I had a difficult time trying to bring a session to the table because it's not something we always talk about at work as well, our sexual orientation, right? And, or, gender transition and all of that. So any tips and tricks for someone like myself or others who in the room are trying to build those programs of how to safely talk about that, have somebody, come and speak. So can you talk a little bit about that? I'd love to share that with the group.
It's such a great question, Heather, so thank you for asking that. It is a difficult population, and I love that you use the word intersectionality, because not many of us lead with our sexual orientation or our gender identity, but most of us, every one of us, leads with our gender expression. Because every one of you, when you were looking at me, there were a couple of things that came to mind. How is she wearing her hair? Does she have her nails done? Does she have a dress on? Is she wearing heels, right? That's my gender expression. So for those of you that didn't know, gender expression are those physical characteristics that the mind actually sees, the eyes actually see, the mind interprets, and then the mouth likes to say what they've seen, right? Those are really dangerous labels. And it's really dangerous for the LGBT community because sometimes it's unpopular to be a member of the community. So this is how we've gotten around it at IBM. Everything that we do at IBM that's wrapped around LGBT inclusion is always wrapped around the inclusion and the safe wrapper of an ally. So everything that we do is around allyship. And I'm on a movement at IBM. I really want to eradicate the word straight and ally out of our vocabulary because I don't believe those two words belong together. And it's something we have to condition our minds to say, oh, allies, they're not always straight. So Kim talked about this. She's a member of the community. I happen to be a member of the community as well. Well, Kim and I happen to be represented by the letter L in our community, but we see ourselves as allies to the trans community. We see ourselves as allies to our gay brothers. We see ourselves as allies to our bisexual brothers and sisters. But we also realize that not everybody's comfortable coming out. So what we have done is wrapped it under the safety banner of allyship. And when you do that, you might have members of the community who are hesitant, tentative, shy, and not courageous. Because what are they afraid of? I'm afraid of being discriminated against, whether that's overtly or covertly. We all have a bias. Everyone who has a brain has a bias. You're bringing that bias to the table every time you come to work. What we want to make sure is that it's not a bias that's alienating or isolating from somebody else. So if you put it under the safety cushion of allies and allyship, you might see an increase in attendance or participation. Yes?
Hello, thank you very much for this topic and bringing it out. I'd like to say something about companies and what they can do.
Yeah.
You mentioned about the number of countries in which you operate and places where it's illegal to be LGBT.
Yes.
Well, in the majority of states in the United States, it's still legal to fire somebody for being LGBT.
That's right.
And Florida, we've had a bill stalled in our legislature for 3 years now that my company, CSX, was one of the original sponsors of to make it illegal to discriminate, the Florida
That's right.
Workplace Equality Act. And businesses can sign on board in their states to push this type of legislation to protect their employees.
Yeah. Where in Florida do you live, by the way?
I'm in Jacksonville, which took us forever to finally get an HRO passed, and that was actually one of the reasons I went to work for my company.
Yeah.
Is because I saw that they were standing up and defending our community to,
Yeah.
to the rest of the county when the hate was there. And I said, well, this is a safe place for me to work.
What company is that?
CSX Transportation Railroad.
Yeah,
Good job.
excellent. Congratulations. I'll tell you thank you. IBM also has a function in our organization called Government Relations, Government Affairs. And so that is the organization that actually helps us with policies and practices and bills that we want to make sure are consistent with the IBM values and practices where we do business. So Kim had mentioned the state of Texas. I happen to be fortunate enough to fly down to Texas with some senior vice presidents who were on that plane that really conducted 130 meetings with congressional leaders saying, we hope that if this bill gets to the Senate floor, you are on the right side of that issue. And I'm going to let you in on a secret. This goes all the way up to our CEO, and she was very public about this. She was not afraid to call the governor of Texas and say, if this bill comes forward, we really hope that you are on the right side of this issue, because IBM just invested thousands of dollars in the state of Texas for P-Tech schools. So when legislators actually challenged us inside their offices and said, IBM, why do you care about this issue? Because under the safety and the protection of the IBM building, you have a practice that says IBM employees can use the restroom that they're most comfortable using. So this bill doesn't impact you. You couldn't be more wrong than that, because IBMers don't live inside of the IBM building. We go to concerts and arenas and sporting events. And if P-Tech schools are these high school students who are in at-risk locations where we want to bring them into IBM, we want them to have internships, we want them to experience new-collar jobs, we want them to know what it's like to work at IBM in a truly inclusive company who values them for who they are. Well, what happens to those students that we've said, we want to invest in you? Uh-oh. They're in a school system, in a public restroom, in a locker room, or in a facility where suddenly that bill is going to impact them. And not only does it impact those kids, what about the IBMers and their families who are going to those arenas or sporting events or concerts? So it was important to us because all the way up through Ginny Rometty, she was adamant that it was important that the state of Texas be on the right side of that issue.
Yeah, you mentioned several countries and regions during your talk, but you never really talked about Western Europe. Where are they in relationship to like the U.S.?
As it relates to
LGBT,
adaptability,
yeah.
So let me tell you, this is a really tough part of the world. Russia is a really good example of that. In Russia, I think people realize that people could die for being LGBT. There are other parts of the world where you're going to lose a limb, and I'm not being humorous about this. I mean, you're going to lose your limb or you're going to be put in jail. So when it comes to countries like Russia, Poland, I'm going to talk about Romania and Hungary. We actually have employees in those countries who are hosting diversity conferences, and we're trying to bring other companies into the conversation. You know how they're coming? Privately. And right now, that's okay. We are still holding LGBT plus forums and conversations in Russia. We just held one last year. We're going to hold another one in Romania. We're going to do one in Hungary. But we're going to allow companies to come however they're safest, however they feel most comfortable. So if they want to come and they don't want to identify who they are, it doesn't mean that IBM is not going to have the conversation. But it is a very difficult conversation because not all of our programs can be deployed in countries where it's going to put our employees at risk. So it's a delicate balance, right? We want to be bold, we want to be courageous, but we want to do that under the umbrella of saying, am I going to put an employee at risk if we do this? So you always have to be incredibly careful, have the conversation, but enable people to come under the safety of how they're most comfortable. But it's not an easy part of the world, but we're pushing.
Any more questions? Because it's cold in here and we have socks.
And boy, I don't know who you are, but you sure smiled at us this entire presentation. At one point, she was actually like, I'm like, I got to meet her. I'm giving her like 5 pair of socks at the end of the session. Even if you don't want them, I've got white papers and brochures because you just feel like somebody I should know.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the sponsorship of the event.
You're welcome.
And for your talk today.
You're welcome.
I really appreciated the topic, and other presenters this week have discussed LGBT issues. I identify within the community myself, and so it's just been really nice to see that representation. So Heather's question addressed, and you've addressed really well, what companies can do, but I would just like to know what individuals, like what can I do as an ally for trans people?
Yes.
What little things can individuals do?
Okay. Well, one thing that I wanted to say to Microsoft, and thank you guys for being here and for having the diversity wall. I love the superpower. I have a selfie by it. I'm getting it out on social media. I love it. What was fun about that was I chose my own superpower, but what was great was throughout the week people started giving me other superpowers. And what was really great was to see how other people identify and recognize you. That was amazing and powerful. That's one thing, that's one way that we can do it. It's literally by having the conversation, becoming smart about the discussion, and talking about being a member of the community. I think LG&B, we have a responsibility to get smarter about T. Because I think just because we happen to fit under the umbrella of LGBT+, because it's comfortable and it rolls off the tongue and it's easy to say that. At IBM, we say LGBT+, and that's very intentionally. Because not everybody, when we talk about gender identity and gender expression, is represented by those really cute, neat little letters. But we also didn't want to start adding all of these other alphabets at the end of that where everybody's confused. I mean, everybody doesn't even agree, even in the community, with what does Q mean, right? So if we have a debate within the diversity of our own community, how do we expect people who are not members of the community to understand? So I think we have a responsibility as LGBN+, that we need to understand a little bit more about the challenges, have the right conversation, put ourselves in a position of education and learning. And the other thing that I loved about what Microsoft did was I loved your badges out there, like tell me your pronouns, right? If you don't think pronouns are important, if you don't think names are important, and I'm going to share one more personal story. Growing up, I'm the baby and I'm the only girl. Let's see it for the babies, right? I'm a baby and I'll be a baby and I'd love to be a baby, and you can go ahead and comfort me the rest of my career. So the thing that's really important about being the baby is my oldest brothers always made the mistakes. And when my parents got upset, they never really actually said Jay, Jeff, or Joy. Whenever they were mad, how did it come out? Jafe, right? We all laughed. We thought that was really funny, but it didn't matter to us because our names we didn't think of as being really important. We thought it was really funny. In the trans community, it is incredibly important that if they decide to transition and they choose a name that it's a more appropriate reflection of who they are authentically, it's really important that we call them by that right name. And what about pronouns? If I suddenly have a pronoun that identifies masculine or feminine with my authentic self, it's incredibly important that we call that person by their appropriate pronoun. So one thing that we're doing at IBM is we are looking at adding gender pronouns to Blue Pages. Man, I've been trying to do this since last year, and GDPR got a little bit in my way around sensitivity, privacy, and confidentiality. But we think it's really important because we believe allies, it's a physical, visible way of sponsorship and support that even if I'm not a member of the trans community, I'm going to put my pronouns on my email signature or I'm going to make the selection. It's those subtle conversations that we can make people feel comfortable. I think it starts with education, and I love that Microsoft had those badges out there where we could identify our pronouns. I thought that was really fast forward thinking, so thank you, Microsoft.
First, a couple comments. One, don't sleep on the importance of socks. They will change your life. I'm telling you, change your life. Second thing is, I didn't go through something as dramatic as losing a parent with a great manager, but I had a great manager, and it makes such a big difference in how you approach your job every day.
Yes, it does.
It's amazing. So,
Yes.
So it's a big deal. I just realized the company I'm at now, we're early, I think, in the discussion. And in my previous companies, we were like IBM. It was very, it was just there and kind of just as a given. And so moving to a company where you're early in the discussion, it's a little jarring, and I didn't realize what I had been taking for granted. And so I'm getting some questions today. One of the things that drove me to come here was one of my colleagues asked me kind of, what's in this for me? They feel like they're being pushed is being pushed upon them. And I realize I don't know for lack of a better term, the elevator pitch to say that. It's kind of, I feel like it was kind of what we were referring to about the, saying it's good for business. Well, that just doesn't cut it, right?
Doesn't feel as good.
Yeah, it doesn't feel as good, right? So I was just wondering, how do you approach that? Like when you're far down in this discussion, but you have the remedial discussion, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, and this goes back to her. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name. Rachel? This kind of complements Rachel's question as well, which, how can we as individuals make a difference? If there's not an employee resource group or business resource group in your companies today, think about having that conversation. There's also something that we've done at IBM really successful, and it's easy to do, and it's called, it used to be called reverse mentoring, but the millennials told us we should get a little more modern and contemporary, so we changed its name, borrowed some of its best practices. We now call it LGBT plus mentoring for leaders, right, and influencers. And so what we've done is we've brought a number of LGBT plus employees and allies into the conversation. And we've enabled our managers to voluntarily raise their hand and say, I don't feel really educated on this discussion. I don't know how to have a dialogue. I'm not sure that I'm creating the most inclusive environment I can in my team, because the point of Heather's earlier was we're invisible. You don't see us. There aren't always characteristics that have our initials on top of us. So how do we do that? So number one, an employee resource group. The other thing, one conversation at a time. Creating that environment that says we're rich with discussion and it's okay to bring your whole self into the conversation. Maybe create a mentoring opportunity where employees or managers or leaders who don't feel as comfortable about the conversation can get into a small group and have a dialogue. That's an opportunity. The employee resource groups as well, volunteer activities at the location is a great way to bring visibility, and doing cross BRG or employee resource group initiatives as well. So it's not just, it goes to the intersectionality part as well. How do I bring these different diverse groups together to have a conversation? It might come out as part of the dialogue.
One thing I did want to add too is at the beginning of the video, you can't be what you can't see.
Yeah.
That's an amazing phrase to me.
Yeah.
And it puts it in a very compact
Yes.
thing that you can get across, and people will understand that if you're doing it.
But we can talk offline too, because we probably have some good ideas as well.
Right, thank you very much. I know we're out of time, and you probably all have somewhere else that you need to be. So thank you so much for sticking with us. Appreciate it. Thank you.